Okay, I guess we get started at 8:30. This is an announcement regarding public notice of meeting. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by updating the OPPD website, and by mailing such notice to each of the district's directors on July 3rd, 2018. Before we get rolling, Tim, could you give us our safety brief?
Yeah, you are in the 9th floor on the west side of the building. In the event that we have to exit this room here, we would actually go to the elevators, exit all the way down to the main level, and we would exit out the building. In the event of a fire, we would actually take the steps, not the elevator. Fire extinguisher is right behind us here to my left. The AD and first aid kit is just to the right of the elevators in the atrium area here of the conference center. One on top of each other. Is anybody here certified in the use of an AED or in CPR? Several hands have raised. Appreciate that. Again, in the event of a fire, we would use the steps, go all the way down, exit out on the 17th Street side of the building. In the event of severe weather, it's not anticipated today, the board and the senior management team would actually move to the call center area. We'd be directed by security in that instance. If you have a medical condition, please write it down or tell your neighbor. And I believe that concludes the safety briefing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, our first committee report today is finance. Mick?
We're going to turn that over to guess who? Javier, good morning.
He's
Good
been
morning.
busy.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm going to present the June financial reports. In your board packet, you have both the May and the June financial reports. Just a reminder that at the June meeting, because of the timing of the June meeting, we were still closing the books for May financials, so we did not have the packet for May. So this month, you'll get both packets for May and June. I'm going to address the June results here in my comments. It's been hot. I think that's the topic of the month. It's been relatively warm. It's been warmer than what we budgeted for. It has been warmer than previous years, and that really has driven retail revenues a little higher than what we expected. Retail revenues for June were $94.4 million, which is $3.2 million over budget. Off-system sales revenues were $21.3 million, which is $11.3 million over budget. This is, I believe, the first month where off-system sales has been higher than power purchases. If you remember, throughout the year, for a number of reasons, we've had a transmission line that was down from last year's tornado and on other market reasons. The value of off-system purchases has been higher than off-system sales. And this month, that trend, we started that trend reversing in May, and for sure in June there was certainly something that happened. Other income for June was $3.8 million, which is $1.2 million under budget. Again, we continue to see the fluctuations of in the market for mark-to-market for some of our investments. Not something that is really concerning me at this time. Really, again, the topic, I think it's the heating up in temperatures, increasing revenues, both retail revenues and off-system sales, to bring us back to a close and in fact above our budget expectations. Our operation and maintenance expenses for June, and this excludes fuel and purchase power, were $27.5 million, which is $1.2 million over budget. Last year, the topic was pretty much every month we were coming with O&M expenses under budget. This year, this is over budget, $1.2 million over budget in the month of June. The majority of this is explained by increases in fees from SPP. So the value we're extracting from the market is tremendous. It's great, and you can see that in off-system sales and lower power purchases, but that comes at a cost, and those are fees that we pay to the Southwest Power Pool. So this amount over budget and O&M expenses is something that we did not budget for, but it's just additional expenses for SPP. We will budget for that next year, and those will continue to change as the market continues to move.
Have you considered putting those fees against the
purchase price of that rather than separating them on the P&L?
We have, what I like about these separate is that we can have a more objective analysis on SPP fees, and we can actually track those. We have accountability, we have senior management accountability for SPP fees, and it allows us to engage in a little bit better manner with the different SPP committees and trying to keep those fees as low as possible. For presentation purposes, I could easily do one or the other. If there's a preference for me to net those out, I can certainly do that.
Another follow-up on the fees, are they volumetric or is there some base amount?
I am not sure.
Okay.
I can get you that answer if you.
I think it's a little bit of both, right?
I think it's a little bit of both,
It
yeah.
has to do with some, obviously, there's some facility-related costs associated with assets in SPP, so that's a piece of the other, maybe volumetric, all the other pieces. I don't know, Troy's here, you probably have the best information of.
The volume side is really based, in this particular instance, on new transmission that's being built within the SPP footprint and how those costs get distributed to the host utilities, or not host, the utilities within SPP. So we pay a certain percent of those fees based upon the size of our utility, and there was just more cost in that area, I believe, than what we had anticipated for this year.
And conversely, when we build transmission lines, we get subsidized in a way from SPP members, so it goes both ways.
There's a lot of other benefits SPP gives us, so, I mean, they allow us to have all the wind that we have, balancing, there's many benefits that the RTO provides. These costs, so, I mean, over the long run, it's really about improvements of the system.
Okay, thank you.
On fuel and purchase power expenses for June were $34.5 million, which is $8.2 million over budget. Again, this amount is lower than the power, than the off-system revenues that I explained earlier. This month, we were seeing that reversal of off-system revenues coming in higher than power purchases. Other expenses for June were $33.4 million, which is just $1.1 million under budget. Net income, so the combination of the higher revenues, relatively flat expenses, results in a net income for June of $24 million, which is $5 million over budget. And I'll reference the May results. In May, our net income for year-to-date was about $2 million under budget. These June results put us year-to-date at $3.8 million over budget. So we've caught up for the year, and we expect the next coming months, especially with the heat we're having, to keep us at that healthy level. Again, our net income for 2018, as part of our corporate operating plan, continues to be budgeted at $79.6 million, and we believe that based on these preliminary results, we should be able to hit that net income target that was part of the budget. On the capital front, capital expenditures for June were $14.8 million. That's $1.6 million over budget. We're finally catching up. If you remember, we've had a really stormy start of the year, and that has delayed a lot of the capital construction projects. We've been busy now advancing some of those projects. So for the month of June, we were $1.6 million over budget. However, year-to-date, capital expenditures are still lagging $12.3 million under budget. So capital expenditures for the year are $58 million, which is $12.3 million under budget. The unrestricted cash balance at the end of June was $410.9 million, which was $85.4 million over budget. Just a reminder that $85.4 million over budget includes carryover from 2016 through 2017 through 2018. We've had relatively positive years, and we have been able to build up our cash reserves, which is a healthy financial metric, and it is a metric that we will use, we're going to propose to use here shortly in the next agenda item. So if there are no questions on the financials, I can jump onto the next agenda items. Okay. The next agenda item is for board action. It's for your consideration as a board for the Thursday meeting. It's a resolution to authorize the issuance of debt. So because of our cash balances being healthy where they are today, we are faced with the opportunity to use some of these cash balances and pay off high interest rate debt that we have on our books today. The amount could vary anywhere between $100 to $200 million. Today, based on current market conditions, we're looking at probably paying off somewhere around $150 million of existing debt with high interest rates. This is a fantastic action that OPPD can take because we have healthy financial metrics and we have that cash position. Now, we're in a position where we can do that, and if interest rates continue to be as low as they are, we would wait 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks from the defeasance, from the day we pay off the bonds, and we will evaluate market conditions. And if market conditions continue to be favorable, we would issue debt to finance capital projects that we're constructing today, to replenish the revenue fund for OPPD. In a way, making us whole from a cash perspective and also from a debt perspective, making sure that we're not increasing our debt burden. It would be a way for us to continue to optimize our debt portfolio without lowering the interest rate, without adding any more new debt to the books. This is a transaction that would, I believe, it would generate approximately $13 million of net present value savings for our ratepayers over time. And it's something that we're allowed to do because of our relatively healthy cash position that allows us to enter into this transaction. In front of you, you have the fact sheet explaining basically what I just explained right now. On Thursday, we'll have Mr. Bruckner and John Petter from Kutak Rock addressing the board and telling you from their legal perspective what the authorization does. You should have in your packets the preliminary official statement, a copy of the preliminary official statement, and both resolutions for your review, so that on Thursday, if you choose to approve it, we won't have to read through all of those, which could take many hours. At this point, I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Interject. The Finance Committee met on this with Javier and John and others. And this is really a very practical idea, or an unusual idea. I've not seen this happen at OPPD, but there's a $13.5 million savings over time, and it's just a transaction that I think makes a lot of sense. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts.
I read the other presentation about the use of the cash. This is the first time we've done it, and we're doing this because of the new tax law. Is that correct?
So it's not the first time we've done it. We've done it a few times, but you have to go back maybe 20 years from the last time we did these. Part of the tax law changes is certainly one of the reasons why we're doing these now. Otherwise, we would probably do a refinancing like we've done in the past. We have an opportunity to continue to replace existing debt pay off existing debt with our own cash generated from operations and replenish our revenue fund through the issuance of debt. So mechanically, it's a little different than what we've done in the past, but it's the end results are really not that different. We're lowering our interest exposure.
And as I understand that 2 weeks' time that you can make the decision of whether or not you want to go out for the bonds, that's the biggest risk we may have as far as what the interest rate may be, whether or not it would rise or fall. But still, as far as you did a risk management study on this, I assume.
That is correct. So the worst thing that could happen is we pay off existing debt, and then interest rates rise, and we don't choose to replenish the revenue fund with new debt. Our cash balances will drop by about $150 million, but so will our debt portfolio.
Right.
So net it's still a positive for the district. From a cash management perspective, we would still be looking at an opportunity to go out into the market, issue debt when interest rates are low enough for us to replenish cash and
Javier,
keep those cash levels.
We aren't locked into a specific dollar amount like $150 million. That can be altered based on, if that in fact happens, then we don't necessarily have to issue for $150 million.
That is correct. So the board authorization allows us to issue up to $200 million of new debt. What will happen is when we choose to defease up to $200 million of existing debt, that will set the ceiling of the new debt that we would issue. We could always issue less debt if interest rates are not as favorable, but if interest rates are favorable, we could issue as much as the amount of debt we're paying off, again, to keep our overall debt portfolio whole and our interest rate lower than what it was before.
But we are locked into whatever our sale is. We're just not locked into what our new debt is within that 2 years.
Depending on the interest rate, yeah.
Well, I think we want this to stand as two separate transactions. That's why there's a 15-day pause.
It's gotta be, yeah.
Debt defeasances have been around forever. I've
Yeah, we
seen it
understand
before.
that.
This is just a great example of really good
Yeah.
treasury management.
Great.
And, I want to shout out to Javier Fernandez, Laura Langford, John Thurber. That team did a great job with this. This is really good work.
Yeah. And one other metric, as far as your rating agencies, what is a healthy cash balance for us? I know we're way above that, but what is that number as far as a healthy cash balance?
I wish they would tell me. There are ranges, and they do publish certain parameters. Right now, our days cash on hand it's in the 215 days, which is considered healthy. I believe that if we draw that down all the way to 150 days, we would still be at a healthy place where we can still have conversations with rating agencies. Anything below 150, it's really where they start.
150?
150, yeah, that's where they start asking more questions. Now, in this case, our cash balances could drop temporarily, and I fully expect them to continue to increase. But that gap between 150 and 215 is what allows us this opportunity to pay off debt.
So Javier, take the 150 days and equate that to dollars now, right? So
Yeah.
that's about 300 million?
It's about 300 million.
Yeah. So that gives you a sense of 150 days cash on hand equals about $300 million.
Correct.
Wait, it didn't seem that long ago, we were around 100 days of...
Yeah, that's what we're wondering. Wasn't it?
And 100 days is what it's the absolute minimum that we have set at OPPD in order for us to maintain solvency. Let's forget about the rating agencies. It's for us, it's our bare minimum, and we're, thank goodness, significantly higher than that.
Yeah, I think this is great. I was looking at it, I was just chuckling, I said, damn, he's smart.
Well, I have a great team behind me, and I can't take
It's
it.
great, the whole team's smart.
So is this a tool that we can use again in the future? It doesn't matter whether the
long as we
interest
have
rates
the
are
cash.
rising?
Well, that's what drives it. I mean, their ability to replace the debt with lower rates is really what the economic driver is.
So right, so there are two
But
things.
you
One,
can do it on an inclining interest rate over time.
it depends, it's all relative, right? As long as our existing interest rates in our books continue to be higher than prevailing interest rates in the market, that's the first condition for us to do this. And the second condition is for us to have healthy cash balances to be able to do this in the future. So therefore, that's another reason why we're looking at issuing debt to replenish our cash balances and be able to deploy our cash in the best possible way.
Thank you.
Having cash on hand gives you options.
Yes.
It makes things available that you otherwise don't have available. So, and the debt transaction done in December, I think had a net present value of, what, 22 million? I remember right.
$22 million, total $31 million of
This is
savings.
35 million net present value in 8 months. That's pretty cool. Yeah. It's great management.
Good job.
Thank you. Okay, there are no more questions. I'll move on to the last item on the agenda, which is the financial auditing services. OPPD, as a public power district, we're required by state statute and our bond resolutions to have an annual audit on our financial records, and this is something that we've done for decades. Our current financial auditing services agreement with Deloitte extends through the completion of all of 2017 audits. It's a 3-year contract, and at the end of the 3 years, we have chosen to go out and issue an RFP, just as a part of a healthy process for competition. We were very I shouldn't say lucky, but I was very pleased to see 4 national reputable firms give us proposals, and Director Trinan was part of the evaluation process. We had my team and the internal audit team review all proposals, and of the 4 proposals we received, again, all high-quality, good firms. I was very pleased to see the firm that we're proposing here to move forward for the board to approve is BKD LLP, came through as the firm with the best proposal for the district, the lowest fees, highest quality that matched what we were looking for. BKD is it's in the top 15 accounting firms in the nation. It's what I would consider a mid-sized accounting firm, reputable, great track record. They have great governmental experience, GASB experience, which is important for our business. They are the auditing firm for a few local governments, City of Omaha and a few others in the region. They have offices in both Lincoln and Omaha. And so overall, they came through as a great proposal, and we're moving. We presented this to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee agreed to move this recommendation forward to the board for Thursday. We will complete, if the board approves these, we will complete all the work that we're currently doing with Deloitte. They're still helping us with a few audits as per the contract in 2017, and we will likely start working with BKD in the next month or 2 to start working on the transition for them to start helping us with the 2018 audit at the end of the year.
Okay.
And again, the committee met on this, and just our take was, this is, BKD's a better fit today than the other candidates. I think we've been with Deloitte for quite some time, but according to all the input we got, BKD is maybe more flexible and and does provide the same high-quality service as all other applicants. So we recommend BKD to the board.
As far as their charges, how does that work? Is it similar to Deloitte? Were they lower, or is this the best of?
They were lower, but price was not the only determinant, but their fees were the lowest of the pack, which helped with the decision, but fees were not the only reason. It was fees and expertise and strength of the team, and they came in as a winner. I would like to take the opportunity also to thank Deloitte, because they've been fantastic. They've been a great firm. We've worked with them for many, many years, and we look forward, maybe we'll continue to work with them in the future. They've been great partners, great auditors. They've worked with us, they've challenged us, and they've been really, really good to work with. So high-quality team at Deloitte, and we're expecting the same.
They have an office here as well, right?
What was that?
BKD?
In Omaha,
They have an
correct.
office in Omaha as well.
Yes.
Javier, one quick question. In the last 25 years, all the accounting firms have gone through a name change and a merger and spin-offs. What did BKD used to be?
And what's their name?
That I don't know.
Barrett Kurtz Dobson.
Barrett Kurtz?
Barrett Kurtz Dobson.
I don't know that they've been part of a major consolidation.
Okay.
Like Deloitte and Touche and PricewaterhouseCoopers. And
Okay.
most of them, it went from a Big 8 when I was that age to now Big 4. But they're a international reputable firm.
Okay.
I think Javier's team, Laura Langford and Michelle, I think they ran a very fair, open process, and I think they got to the right conclusion. I'm personally very pleased with where they are. And for the record, BKD was the low bidder. So it'll be a savings. It won't be on the scale of 13 or 22 million. It'll be a cost reduction. And I think our experience with them to date has been very positive. So I'm pleased with where the team ended up.
Were there other accounting firms considered?
Three others, four total. Some large firms that didn't have local presence declined to bid because they didn't want to eat the travel costs and so forth. But I think we had a very good representation. The purchasing group, sourcing group helped also. And legal review. So I think the process was well done and got to the right conclusion. And Craig was involved also.
Part of the finance committee.
Yeah.
If there are no other questions, that concludes my report in the Finance Committee. Director Mines?
It's easy. Mr. Chairman, we're done.
Okay, thank you. Next committee report will be nuclear. Tom?
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Fisher.
Thank you, Director Barrett. In terms of the Nuclear Oversight Committee, we have a few things to report. We are doing a number of short-term projects throughout the district to help the district. It's something that we felt strongly about in terms of Fort Calhoun employees being able to support the district. As we move into decommissioning, it does allow us to adjust our schedule so that we can do that. And then as a result, we don't have to go out and hire outside services. So it's really one of these cost-saving measures that we're helping out with the district. So they did do some asbestos abatement around the district recently. Also, we have submitted into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission a request to release 120 acres from the purview of the Fort Calhoun site. That submittal just went in recently. It takes about 1 year to complete, and so at the end of that year, we'll have 120 acres that we'll have to figure out from our economic development side what we do with that. But we're trying to reduce costs as much as we can as we go through the decommissioning, and this is another effort to do that.
Mary, is that property north of the plant?
It is property north of the plant, yes. Last, I just want to report on our dry fuel storage project. I know as we put the data sheet in a couple of weeks ago, it said that we had 8 concrete modules poured and complete. I believe today we're at 12, so we continue to make great progress. We are really moving along and really proud of the team and making sure that we're out there ensuring the quality of the project that's going on. And so we remain on schedule and on budget in terms of that project. I also want to report on the nuclear oversight part of Fort Calhoun. As we've gone into the year, we had a discussion, and I believe Director McGuire brought up this question around independence of nuclear oversight and could they continue to report to me. And one of the things I want to report going on this week at Fort Calhoun is that we have outside auditors coming in to audit our quality assurance program to make sure we're maintaining that independence. And so we have 7 auditors in this week that are looking at our QA program to make sure we have that independence that we're looking for. So the entrance was just yesterday. The exit will be at the end of the week, and we'll ensure that our quality assurance program is moving and is as independent as it needs to be going forward. The last thing I'd like to report on.
Could you give us a river flood update?
Yes, so I will be happy to give you a river flood update. We continue to watch the river flows. I do know that the Army Corps of Engineers is increasing the flow coming out of the Gavins Point Dam because they need to do that. We stay in contact with them. We look at it daily. We had minor flooding as we went through some peaks, nothing really substantial, a little bit of flooding in the parking lots and in the ditches around the plant, nothing that interfered with any of the operations that we had, no roads flooded, that sort of thing. So we continue to watch that. We're also continuing to watch that at North Omaha and Nebraska City because it does affect those plants as well. We still have water up over what they call the veranda at Nebraska City. We're waiting for that level to go down. I will tell you it's going down very slowly, and as they increase the discharge at the dam up above, we're waiting to see what effect that's going to have. I don't expect substantial decline in river flows between now and the end of the summer. Having said that, it's also good for us come this winter because it means that there'll be enough water to keep it at a level that we need for operations during the winter time. So positives and challenges going forward, but I believe we are currently our operations are safe and and we're monitoring that with the Army Corps.
Have you had to do sandbagging?
I don't believe we had any sandbagging. I know that we staged it, and I know that we were looking at, did we need to do it? I think they were ready to go out and do it, but at the end of the day, I don't believe we had to. Was that right, Tim?
That's correct. We had
Yeah.
the bags staged and our barriers ready to go, but we're going to stop rising and
Good.
actually install it. But they are still staged if they're needed.
Good, thank you.
And just to let you know, over the course of the years, I know Lisa's team, Russ Baker and the team, and the folks at Fort Calhoun, we've put additional gauges to support understanding the river level and some of the requirements upstream of Blair, so we could get better information, quicker information for us to make decisions at the plant. And so it's been a great cooperation with the Corps of Engineers in that regard. And we had just met with them a couple months ago to kind of talk about kind of what the spring looked like, what the summer looked like, and then we got 3 weeks of rain. So, and that changed their forecast, and it changed kind of our approach on it as well. So, great coordination.
Amazing what rain
Is
does.
there a magic number on a
Probably.
gauge, either at Fort Calhoun Station or in Blair, like 28.9 or 31 feet? Is there a magic number that we're looking at to say, this is where things start to happen?
There's a magic number at the facility itself about where we start to get nervous and we start to stage, as Tim said, barriers and sandbags. We got very close to that level, but we did not go over that level, which is why it was staged but not utilized.
Okay.
That just says that at that point, we expect that we will have flooding that could come into our facility where we would have to take additional measures. But we're still well below where we think that we would have significant problems.
Do you guys train on that, or evidently you have to have an action plan? And
We have action plans that we're reviewing in the spring at all of our facilities, North Omaha, Nebraska City as well. So it is a regular spring activity that we will look at in terms of, are we ready in case there is a flood?
all right, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? I'll move on to the next agenda item. Okay. On the next agenda item, I have a board action. We are requesting to build a new facility, a new security facility, and over the course of time at Fort Calhoun, I know we've requested from the Board of Directors to build several facilities up there. This one is a bit different, and I want to explain that before we go into the presentation. As we've gone through operations, really the facilities that we've had to build are to meet regulatory requirements. This one is different than that. This one is really based on minimizing the cost of our decommissioning. So as we go into safe store, the thing that we have been looking at is dormancy and what that means to us, as well as moving our spent fuel out to our independent spent fuel installation pad. As we've looked at this long-term and what we need to do with security, remember that fuel likely will be out there until DOE comes and gets it, which likely is, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So it's a long-term investment. So what we're going to present today is a way to minimize the cost of our security system going forward over that total life cycle. And so I would ask, Chris Hymas is our Director of Security. He's going to give you a brief presentation. There are things that if you have questions about that we may not be able to answer today in regards to the security of the facility, but we believe there's enough information here that we can share in a public forum that will give you the comfort that we've done our homework and that we're headed in the right direction. Also with them is Tim Euling, who is the Senior Director of Decommissioning, and so they're here to answer any questions that you may have. And so I'll turn it over to Chris.
Okay, good morning. As Mary mentioned, I'm Chris Hymas. I'm the Director of Site Security at Fort Calhoun Station. We're ready to move into Phase 3 of security decommissioning, and we're here to discuss the options that we reviewed and the recommendation that we came up with following those reviews. So today we'll discuss the overview, we'll discuss the timeline, we'll go through the options, the 4 options that we looked at, we'll provide financial comparisons, provide our recommendation, and then go into questions. So in June of 2020, once Fort Calhoun Station moves all of the remaining fuel from wet storage to dry storage, we have the opportunity to reduce our protected area footprint. And we can reduce that footprint to the location immediately surrounding the ISVC pad. This is an overview of the site as it sits right now. Reducing that PA footprint allows us to move into the next phases of Safe Store, and it also provides long-term operating cost savings for OPPD. We're looking to award the contract in fall of this year, move into design phase to be completed in spring, into procurement in later in spring of 2019, with completion of construction by June of 2020, so that we are completed along with the dry cask evolution, so we can maximize the efficiencies. So the 4 options that we looked at is current configuration. We could stay exactly as we sit right now. There's nothing in the regulation that requires us to change, but as we'll discuss later, it's not the best financial option, right? We also looked at repurposing the current security access facility that's on site. We also looked at repurposing the current warehouse that is just adjacent to the ISVC pad, so there was an option there given its current location. And then we looked at building a new ISVC operations facility. So under our current configuration, there'd be very minimal initial cost. We would have to submit an NRC submittal, so there's some cost there, but really we would just stay in place. There would be no impact on dry cask evolution, and it would be a very small NRC submittal. Unfortunately, it would result in higher costs. It'd be a much larger footprint. It would require additional staffing, additional equipment, and probably one of the biggest impacts is keeping that larger footprint. All activities that take place inside that footprint are subject to NRC regulations. So everything would have to be searched. Personnel, vehicles, equipment would cause a significant increase in cost for any safe store deconstruction activities. So we looked at repurposing the security access facility. There would be reduced design cost, just to kind of tweak it to meet the regulatory requirements that we would need to move into an ISVC operation. Low risk to subsurface interference since it's already built, and it is a newer building, so we recognize that. Once again, it results in a larger footprint, requires additional staffing to support that footprint. And there's significant modification, so it doesn't, there isn't as much of a reduction in cost as you would think, because the building was not built to meet ISVC operation standards. Very similar, we looked at the warehouse as well. It's located very close to the ISVC, so we would be able to shrink that PA footprint, but it would not allow us to shrink it as far as we would like. It already has infrastructure to support an alarm station, and once again would be reduced design cost. However, similar to the SAF, would result in a larger footprint, higher staffing levels, and there would be significant modifications, not only to meet the security needs, but that building's been there for some time. The HVAC, the roof would need significant modifications to make this a building that we want to sit in for the next 40, 50, 60 years. So the final option we looked at is building a new ISVC operations facility. It would come with, or the pros would be a lower annual operating cost, and we'll get into the specific numbers here. It can be completed in parallel with the dry cast activities, so there's no impact on that timeline. We can build it to the same level as the ISVC to help mitigate flooding impacts, and it allows the SAF current security access facility to be used as our industrial access point once we move into deconstruction activities at some point down the road. There would be a higher initial cost because we are building new. Also require the most work to be done prior to June 2020, which is an aggressive timeline. And the unknown subsurface risk because we'll be building on an area that hasn't been built on.
Chris, I have 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
What is the estimated initial cost?
8.5 million.
Okay. The unknown subsurface risks, have we done any drilling to see what's down there? Have we taken any samples?
So we've had the utilities came out last week and surveyed the area. We do have a main power line that was identified that will not be an interference to where we're proposing to build. And then we have a company that's going to come out and give 3 samples to drill out of the areas, but has not been completed. That'll be before the end of the month, to at least understand what those risks might be.
Okay.
Part of it is we want to make sure it gets approved.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there's a problem, we'd like to know that now, because then we're back in the soup with the other 3 options.
Sure.
Right.
So it'd be nice to have that kind of capped off, or,
And that's kind of the reason that we wanted to get it into the board
yeah,
as soon as we could.
okay.
The life cycle costs, if we go back to that, that's mainly staffing is what you're talking about?
Yeah, we have
And
2
also
slides
security?
coming up that are
Okay.
related to the cost, so we'll go through those.
But just real quick, if we identify something in those sampling that would significantly impact either the operation or lifetime cost, obviously we'll readdress what you're going to be seeing here and then come back to the board with the alternatives if we need to.
Yes, sir. So the financial comparison for all 4 options I just discussed, we talk about vendor costs for construction, design, and procurement. We also identified internal costs for OPPD. The delay in implementation identified that repurposing the SAF for the warehouse would not allow us to complete construction until all ISFAC, our dry cast campaign operations are completed. So that's going to cause a delay in us implementing this new ISFAC operations facility, which would require us to keep higher staffing levels for a long period of time. So you can see the total cost of implementation there. So annual operating costs for all 4 options, and then we looked out for 20, 40, and 60 year, what the net present value and return on investment would be for all 4 options. So in summary, the current configuration, while it would have a higher initial cost, for a total life cycle, it does provide the best value for the district. Repurposing the current SAF or the warehouse, while it would be lower initial cost over the lifetime, it's not going to provide the value that building a new facility would. So our recommendation is to move forward with the new ISFAC operations facility that provides the best value in total life cycle cost for the district.
So, I understand what you've proposed here. Have you been pretty aggressive if you had a larger footprint looking at non-human measures? I mean, electronic surveillance, other surveillance techniques or technologies that would reduce that operating cost, because this is a lot of money over time.
It is. So current regulation would not allow us to use that alternate technology. There are some sites that are looking at piloting something like that, but we would be years off from any type of regulation that would allow us to take, opportunity there.
Hey, Chris, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you approach the board and show me exactly, I can see where the concrete and light gray is, and that's a footprint, I assume. What? Oh, he can't.
No.
Oh,
Security.
okay. I withdraw that question.
We can, Director Bear, we'll
Okay.
maybe share that separately with you, but not in a public venue.
So what we're proposing would reduce that PA footprint by about 75 to 80%. So it is a significant reduction in size. So I can share that.
Okay. At a later time, I'm going to have to find out where the building's going to go and location and how is it being shrunk? I just don't,
Be a great opportunity maybe for the Nuclear Oversight Committee to actually, and maybe other board members, as you want to do visits, to go up and see exactly what that plan and what that change may look like. And
On your
we'll-
yacht.
We'll make that, certainly offer to plan to do
Some of
that.
us have already toured that already, I understand.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand the difference.
A picture that we can can share with you that
Okay.
is.
It's a long walk right now from the present security building to where there is.
It is. No more questions? I think that concludes the report.
How about the issue, over a 40-year lifetime, you would save $100 million was the estimate? What were the variables that went into that equation?
Chris, you want to answer that?
Personnel.
So
Is it just pure personnel?
it's personnel and then additional equipment upkeep that would, diesel generators, microwave zones, cameras, the major equipment that would be required for a larger footprint.
And 100 million sounds a lot bigger than 2.5 million a year, but that's what it is, 2.5 million a year in
Okay.
extra operating expenses.
Okay.
Over 40 years, is $100 million. So, dollar here, dollar there, just adds up.
For the record, I think what they're showing here is the current configuration is what we already planned for, and we've been funding our nuclear decommissioning funds based on that and many other assumptions. We are projecting to have enough funds enough monies in the fund all of this work. Too many words, fund. in that sentence. What we're looking here is at over time, can we lower the net present value from $98 million, that's a 60-year net present value, that's a negative $98 million present value. If we can shrink that from $98 million to $60.4 million,
Okay.
that's a $38 million reduction in 60 years on a net present value basis. That is really the benefit from this project to the nuclear decommissioning fund. The issue here, and I've worked with Mary, my team has been working with nuclear decommissioning, is it would require us to spend money a little faster than anticipated because we're building a new building. We are very comfortable with knowing that the funds in the nuclear decommissioning trust funds have enough funds in there to proceed with something like this to save money in the long run.
Okay.
So I think go ahead.
No, that's all right, go ahead.
I think the biggest, not concern, but the biggest question mark that is here, and I really like what you've done a really good job, and it's just what we don't know. What are our confidence bands in what we're projecting a new facility would cost? So you've got 3 core tests, but what's your history of project management and projecting and actually delivering? And I think it's been good.
Yeah, so what I would say is that we've gone out and we've done benchmarking across the industry, and this is right in line with what other decommissioning plants have seen in terms of their cost. So we have done that benchmarking, so I think we feel very comfortable and confident that we've done our homework and that we can represent to you today that we believe this will be a close approximation of what we would anticipate. In terms of project control, all I have to do is look to the dry cast storage facility. If I look at system abandonment, if I just look across what we're doing at Fort Calhoun today, we are remaining on schedule and on budget. I do believe that we have talented, capable individuals up there that have really stepped up to this challenge. I feel very confident in representing to you today that we believe these costs will be very close to what we would anticipate in the future.
The one thing that blows this up is if the DEQ or the federal government says, okay, we're going to take all spent fuel and move it off. And then that blows up the model, but I don't see that happen.
Well, it would have to be the Department of Energy, and we have a contract with the Department of Energy to take the fuel.
Right.
Department of Energy has been working on for a number of years Yucca Mountain. I don't see any progress in terms of federal legislation or changes that would say that this is going to happen anytime soon. And so I do believe that at a minimum, and this is why I've asked them to look at it at 20, 40, and 60 years, at a minimum, we're at 20 years, and at a maximum, I think we're somewhere in the 60-year time frame. So I do believe this is representative of what we would anticipate.
Javier, are you able to disclose the discount rate used in these calculations?
I'm not sure. I don't see why not, but I don't have that number right
I'm
now.
just curious.
We can get
I
that
can
to
get you
you.
that number
Would you give me
later.
that, please?
Sure.
We got the number, if we can can say it.
I believe we use 3.5% is what we were provided by the financial.
Wow, that's really low.
That's very conservative.
It's extremely conservative.
It's very conservative.
Which does what to the NPD?
It could be much higher.
Well, it really
Interest rate is higher.
impacts the net present value because those years out, 20 or 40 or 60 years, aren't being discounted as strongly as they would be if they use 7 or 8 or 9%, okay? Which would be typical. Typically, it's a cost of capital kind of a number. In this case, since we don't have any equity cost of capital, it's probably just what you calculate your cost of capital is borrowing rate, okay? But that's the lowest discount rate I've ever heard, ever.
Very conservative.
But it's not unlike government entities, public power entities like ours. So that's a big difference. And I think the important thing here is that we're using the same discount rate to discount all cash flows. So you're comparing all cash flows with the same discount rate. It is conservative. I agree with you, and I like to use that conservative number to make sure that even in that scenario, these pencils out. If I were to use a more aggressive discount rate, I could potentially be looking at a scenario that looks great on paper, but we may be discounting it too aggressively. So
I'm not
feel
criticizing,
comfortable
I'm
with
just
that.
saying that's extremely conservative, extremely low. It doesn't change the decision.
Right.
It just alters the numbers.
That's a point.
That we're looking at.
The numbers could be a lot higher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The net present value numbers would be a lot higher.
right.
Well, the net present value numbers would be a lot lower
Maybe lower.
if you discounted at a higher rate.
Correct.
But the relationship between scenarios would remain, and I think that's...
Right.
It's still the right decision.
Right.
Okay? It's just, it kind of smacks you in the forehead to be building a brand-new building in a site where we're tearing most everything else down. Okay? But it makes sense why you're doing it, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And $8.5 million is not that much money for a project like this.
Now, it is also important to know that this is funded by the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Funds, which we have restrictions on investments on that one. And the discount rate we're using is not dissimilar to the interest we're earning on the fund. So from that perspective, I'm comfortable using the same, or a discount rate that is close to the rate that we're earning on the fund. It gives me more comfort not to know that I have enough funds in there to fund this project and for it to make sense.
Well, and I mean, you could justify it just on saving 40 positions over
Correct.
20, 40, or 60 years. I mean, that's a lot of money for 40 positions that you can get rid of by building the building, which is the way I read this.
And again,
40, 12, or 12.
yeah, and again, I mean, the reason that we're bringing this is because I have a great team that is looking at any way to reduce the cost of our decommissioning.
Yeah.
And this one came in and we said, this is one that we really do need to pursue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? I think that concludes our report.
All right, thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Bob.
Yep, that's it, Chairman Kavanaugh.
Next report will be public information.
Okay, public information. I have a report on our Environmental Stewardship Subcommittee meeting. And it's slow going, but we're making some progress. And actually, last week, I was almost like back to the drawing board, and we had a fundamental discussion of what SDs are actually. And before we even define what environmental, and sensitivity or stewardship is. And we decided that what we're trying to do is we're trying to define the culture that guides the company for years to come. So, with the SDs. And then we went to, okay, we have a goal. And what is a goal is? Well, a goal is something that provides direction. And what we were trying to do in the committee, everybody was coming up, and we immediately wanted to put the hows into our goal and make it real long and everything else. And we said, we don't want to do that. We don't want to put the hows into the goal. We want to have the goal, and we decided that it has to be, we want to see clarity, brevity, and transparency. That's going to be the basis for management of all of our reports, and that will provide forums and discussions for years to come. We want something to last for years, to be broad enough for years. Where it gets into the specifics would be down in our metrics, in our specific ways into the hows. So right now, we're cut up just with the goal, and we decided that our goal is, the big thing is that we want the OPPD, we're dealing with OPPD, not the entire world. And we all agreed with the notion of environmental stewardship. But then we said, okay, how do you define that? And then we said, well, we do want a goal. What OPPD wants to do is decrease its environmental footprint on the climate. So that's where we stopped, and we said, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to go back and we're going to define what environmental stewardship is on our committee. And then we also had a brief discussion about metrics, and we're benchmarking metrics. Mr. Moody is helping along with the team, is helping with metrics. And then we're going back and discussing all of this at the next meeting. So the bottom line is, this is slow progress, but we think we have to start from the beginning and then go continue. This is not going to be done in the next month or two. So hold on, and we'll continue to give reports. We're meeting Thursday to discuss more things, and I think we're going to have to continue. This is a lot of work, and I appreciate the team working with us on this. They're coming back with more information for us as we go along, and the big thing is they're sort of educating us about emissions, education, and that type of stuff before we can really figure out metrics and that type of thing. So that's my report for now, to be continued.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Next report is systems management. Rick, got it?
Thank you. So first I want to thank everybody, and I'm going to forget everybody's name, so I guess I won't list them all, for the presentation that they gave at the Systems Committee meeting last Friday on the 6th. It was a terrific presentation that helped me better understand what's happening in the South District and how that relates to the economic activity that OPPD chooses to assist or to work with existing utilities, be they retail, wholesale, or embedded. So it was outstanding, and thanks for the time. It took a lot of time. I think I talked with Kim, I hope we will get to see that presentation available on Diligent.
Yes, it's a confidential presentation that'll load for the board's review.
Right.
Yeah.
So that really helped me better understand, and that's, thank you, and I don't know, Director Trinan, if you found it useful as well?
Yeah, it was very informative, and the takeaway I had was that the district really has its act together. They were on top of the various and varied situations between embedded utilities, retail customers, and wholesale customers. There were contracts in place. It was well organized and well managed, and I was impressed. And
So,
I wouldn't expect any less.
So again, for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it, I encourage you to take a look at it when it's up there. So having said that, I guess I'll turn this over at this point to who wants to catch it?
I have it.
Thank you.
The contract's over 500,000. The first one is the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality. It's like paying taxes every year. You have to pay. So this is the one that's over 500,000, and this is it is for Nebraska City Station as a whole. And with that, if you have any questions. Okay. I think, Mary, you're next.
Okay. I also have a contract over 500,000 for rail services. This is a service contract. Excuse me. It's a 3-year contract, goes out through 2020. $2.943 million is the total of that 3 years. We anticipate about a $981,000 a year for train upkeep. We have over 1,000 rail cars that we do maintenance on every year. They also provide mobile repair if we should need that, if a train should break down. So this is an important contract for us to ensure that we have our our coal deliveries made in a timely manner.
This is a new contract, not a continuation of it?
This is a new contract.
Okay,
It's a
and
new
you put that
3-year
out to bid
contract.
again?
I'm sorry?
Did you put this out to bid also?
We did put it out to bid.
Okay.
It's a services agreement, so.
Right, it's a service agreement, but it was out to bid. Okay.
Yes, we did. We went out for an RFP, and we solicited bids from potential suppliers for this service.
Okay, and we've used them before, right? I think they're a
We have used them
continuation.
before,
They're the
yes.
same
Yes.
vendor that we've had before.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Mary, did you say we own more than 1,000 rail cars?
We do own more than 1,000 rail cars, so
Mm-hmm.
we operate our own.
Have we ever looked at leasing all those rail cars?
I bel-
in the past.
Yeah, I
Have we?
believe we have. What we've found is that this is probably the most economical way for us to proceed, given the amount of coal that we're bringing in.
Okay.
We usually look at that when we do the coal contracts, is that correct? Usually it's around the same time? Or when do we do
look
that?
at the transportation and the coal about the same time, although I think that one of the things that we're doing is, how can we better utilize what we're doing? So we take a look at that every year as well.
And when we get to the position where we replace cars, we may do the economic analysis again on lease versus own.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Okay.
We used to use a combination, right? Or was it kind of a, it seemed to me,
I think as we transitioned, we probably went from lease to owned
Owned.
because of the benefit for us to be able to do that.
Well, we're going to have a tough time finding a lease rate below 3.5%.
that's it.
That's the kicker here. That's the killer. So
That's exactly right.
someday I'd like to just have a one-on-one with you talking about cost of capital. I think that'd be helpful. Okay. Well, I'm glad we've explored it
Yes.
because it's an alternative, and many, many, many people lease cars.
So I want to be clear about this contract. It's a time and material basis. We anticipate approximately this value of this contract, about $981,000 annually on rail maintenance, and that's just based on historical usage, so.
Could I go back to the environmental quality thing? Is the emission fees, is that higher or lower than the previous year?
Just slightly lower.
Slightly lower? Okay. Or just when, what would be considering we cut down on North Omaha?
Is that tied to the tonnage?
It is.
Yeah.
And
It
it's
is, yeah.
capped.
Yeah,
Thank you for the question.
okay, thank you.
I believe Troy has the next item.
So my reporting items on Osmos Utility Services, and what they do for us is they support our ground inspection and treatment of our transmission and distribution poles within our service territory. We inspect approximately 10% of those each year, which is, the total is roughly around 300,000, I guess, so there's quite a few poles that go through this process. And their treatment is good for about 10 years and basically doubles the life of the poles, so it is significant. We did go out through a competitive RFP a while back on this, which they were the cheapest and best bid. It's a 2-year contract. It has a 3 additional 1-year extension provision in it, so we can continue to keep this in place. They have done work for us for many years and performed very well for us. That's about it.
So is the ground level inspection of all the distribution and then treatment of wood, is that? Yeah.
And metal.
So there's oh, sure, all right.
So they'll dig down, they'll do an inspection, they'll do from insect to a variety of other inspections.
Corrosion.
And then they'll do a treatment around it, on the metal poles as well.
And they're working with Russ and all that?
Primarily our distribution side.
For choice of chemicals?
I think he said rust, and you.
Oh, Russ.
No, I
Oh,
said
he
Russ.
said Russ.
Russ, yeah.
Hey, Russ, do you work on rust?
So there's verification that we're doing it environmentally compliant.
And they're certified or listed on the EPA website, so.
Thank you.
How many years does it take to go around to get the entire district?
Approximately 10,
Okay.
if you stay on schedule and, the contract's such that you can kind of ramp up or slow down depending on your budgetary needs, so there's some flexibility within it. So it could potentially take longer or shorter, depending on whatever.
And this is a
project.
2-year contract.
It is 2 years.
Do we direct them where we want the poles inspected? We give them a sector that we want them to work in, that
We
particular?
coordinate closely with them on path, and we track what has been inspected, what needs to be inspected, yes.
I know the Osmos Company, and they are really the kings of wood pole treatment. They truly are nationwide, but I don't know that they really have any expertise. I know 5 years ago, when I was familiar with them, they really didn't have any metal pole expertise. So who does that work for them? Do they sub that out?
They've been an organization working with us for at least 10 years, so
Okay.
they've been part of that. Whether they sublease or not, I'm not aware of that.
We still have a lot of transmission that's wood as well, H-frame wood structures and
Yeah.
even single pole transmission structures, so they'll do all of those as well.
And they drill into the base of the wood poles and put in treatment plugs. I'm familiar with that
And they
technology
dig below
too.
ground too to see what's underneath the surface. I think they
Yeah.
dig 1.5 feet, 2 foot. There's some space there they know they need to get down to check the wood.
Well, it's the band where there's moisture and oxygen. You get too far down, there's no oxygen, it doesn't matter. You get farther up, there's no moisture, so it's a relatively narrow band, so. But they're the right people to do the wood pole stuff, for sure. And if you're confident with the metal pole, that's fine.
This is kind of right up your alley, isn't it?
Yeah.
I ran this business, I understand
He
this.
knows the pole business.
And,
The king of the wood pole made it.
And no, metal.
there was a neat little company up in Edmonton that made a different technology, and it had a lot of copper in it. Little plugs, looked like little golf pencils, and they drill 3 holes around the wood pole, pound those in, put a cap on it, and it would add 10 or 20 years to the life of the pole.
Gotta get
So,
those
yeah,
from-
there's some, and it's cheap, it's, $10 worth of material per pole. Or
Just
20
through,
per pole.
was that cathodic protection or?
Well, that's for wood poles, and it really just, it's really against insects and termites and things like that. I mean, that, and the rot that you get with wood poles. The cathodic protection, there's some interesting technologies to protect, I'll say, a series of poles kind of linked together. There's some interesting things going on in this field because corrosion's an enormous cost for companies, for the whole industry. So there's some interesting things on cathodic protection, better coatings, subsurface coatings, and things like that. So, anyway, I don't want to give a seminar.
Oh, keep talking.
Okay, that's the 500,000. Thank you, everybody. You want to talk about the human-machine interface?
Yes, thank you. In April, the board allowed us to go off and negotiate with ABB, so this is just the report out of our final negotiations with ABB to continue with the upgrades of our control systems, this time for Sarpy County 1 through 3, as well as the Jones Street Stations 1 and 2. Happy to report that we negotiated and awarded the contract to ABB for $630,573. Questions?
And ABB we've used before.
I'm sorry?
ABB is, they're a vendor we've used before. and we seem to have
ABB,
good-
we specifically asked in April to be able to sole source to ABB because this would be,
Right.
the software would now be consistent with the other units.
Right.
And so that was an important item for us to be able to do.
Right. We need them.
And one more item. Nebraska City 2 circulating water pump. We are requesting board action to go out and purchase a spare circulating water pump for Nebraska City 2. It currently has 2 50% pumps. When we have a problem with one of those pumps, we typically will see a D-rate in that unit. Over the course of time, I'll just give you the 2015 and 2016 cost. Lost opportunity cost due to D-rates or not being able to operate in the marketplace was over $2 million. And we spent over $700,000 since 2015 on repairs of these items. So as you can see here, we're asking for authorization to spend $572,601. This will save us a lot of time and effort and be able to operate these units more efficiently going forward.
Mary, did you determine if this spare can be used on NC1 and 2? Can it
It
serve both?
cannot be used on NC1 and NC2, and NC1 does have 3 pumps, so it
Okay.
already has a spare.
All right.
Any
other questions? All right.
Thank you, Director Yoder.
Thank you very much for the report out. And that'll be an action item on Thursday night, correct?
Correct.
Yep. All right. Then it's time to turn to our CFO, Mr. Fernandez, for the SD9 Resource Planning Report. Thank you, by the way, for doing that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It is my pleasure to present the monitoring report for Strategic Directive Number 9, which is resource planning. This monitoring report is really monitoring on the strategic directive as it is written today. I just want to clarify, there will be another discussion later on modifications that the board may want to, but this is what we're reporting as of what the directive says today. And you can see that on the slide in front of you. Really, that OPPD resource planning process will provide the resources and analytical capability to adequately assess OPPD's integrated resource portfolio. I'm not going to read the entire slide, but it's basically the directive. So we've been really busy, even though we did not produce an integrated resource plan this year. This is something that we produce every 5 years as a requirement to the Western Power Area Administration. The last one we presented was in 2016. We'll present another one in 2021, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue to do integrated resource planning continuously. This is something that we do, and it's an embedded part of an embedded function in the utility, very important one. And I'm here to report on the work that we've been doing this year. In front of you, it's a graphic depiction of what the resource planning process looks like. There's on the left-hand side, you see all the different inputs that go into the planning process, and then you can see the blue and the purple squares on the screen shows the flow of information and actions that would take place when we do a formal integrated resource plan, where we heard loud and clear from the board and from our stakeholders that they wanted to be more engaged, not only at the end with the results, but also at the beginning, and it's something that we plan to have, and I'm confident that now that we have a revised Strategic Directive 13, that will give us even more visibility and guidance on how we incorporate the public in the stakeholder engagement. Really, the majority of the work that we've been doing in the team this year has to do with some of the inputs, validating, updating the inputs, and really the dispatch modeling. The evolution of dispatch modeling that has occurred here at OPPD this past year has been phenomenal, and it's just getting better tools, improving on our skills to be able to do dispatch modeling much better and adapt to the new realities we have in the electric industry today.
May I interject at this point, or should I wait till the end?
You may.
Thank you. I'm really excited about our purple boxes there. I think that's a terrific addition, and shows a good responsiveness to the public. So thank you very much for emphasizing that. And you're right on the dispatch modeling. I think we'll see some great new things as well. That's going to be an ongoing process, right? The dispatch modeling improvements.
Well, it's a continuous improvement,
yeah.
right? I don't think there's a place where we can say we've arrived. It's something that we continue to improve. I believe, and benchmark with other utilities, I believe OPPD is certainly on the advanced edge of dispatch modeling, and I'm very proud of the team and the work that we've been able to do.
I think what you're going to see shortly here is the dispatch modeling and now the sub-hour related requirements, and Javier will get into that in a little more detail.
Thank you.
On the sophistication of the modeling and where we need to be as we move forward. So
that's my boss just stole my thunder.
Well, I'd like to hear it again, in your words.
But it truly is that. We've been really busy assessing and making changes. We continue to operate a generation fleet that is complex, and it's reliable and it has a lot of challenges and opportunities. We continue to now integrate a lot of our analysis on the generation side with the transmission side. That's a significant improvement that we've been making. We have been working closely with our transmission group when it comes to dispatch modeling on what makes the best sense when not only on your generation fleet, but the location and the qualities of each type of generation, as it also relates to our transmission infrastructure, and the potential need for additional investments and what that means to reliability in the region. So that integration has occurred this year, probably more than in the past, and I'm really, really happy to see those two groups, transmission planning and dispatch modeling, working closer together. Of course, always observing the rules of engagement and just separation of duties, but it's worked really, really well. And the last one is we continue to increase the use of our renewable energy. Just last year, we announced the contract with the Shoals facility, which we're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony here later this month. The addition of renewable resources continue to pose an opportunity and a challenge also from a dispatch modeling perspective as we continue to now add renewable resources to the existing fleet and for the dispatch modeling to really look at what is the best combination of resources that we have and how do we plan for the future. It's been really interesting, intellectually challenging for the team, but I think we have the right people doing this type of work. We're evaluating not only energy in the market, energy flows in the market to serve our load, but also probably just as much evaluating capacity and where our capacity deficits and shortfalls and where we long or short, depending on the different scenarios we have, looking at both energy and capacity, which is really, really important as we look into the future of OPPD. This has led us to develop a sub-hourly dispatch model. This is something that allows us to look within the hour. You know, as we continue to integrate renewable resources, when there's a cloud coming in and solar power goes down, or the wind stops blowing halfway through the hour, how does the model interact, and how our dispatch modeling captures those different variations within the hour, right? On resources that are not as predictable as the ones that we use that we currently have on fossil fuel. So really, really excited about what the team is doing and the results they're starting to see with sub-hourly modeling. We continue to update our technology costs. We continue to issue RFIs, requests for information to different companies to figure out what is the latest cost of different technologies so that we have the best and the latest and greatest of inputs into the model. I believe that garbage in, garbage out, so we want to make sure that we keep our inputs updated as much as we can. So we've been keeping on top of that, and it's really interesting to see the difference in costs and technology qualities, how fast those change. And again, our team, that's a big part of what our team does. It's keeping those assumptions updated. We continue to issue deterministic modeling, and the risk-based stochastic models speaks a little bit to the sub-hourly dispatch modeling. We're running thousands of simulations with all these different variables to look at what the system could look like under a combination of thousands, literally tens of thousands of simulations in the system. This is something that just years ago we couldn't do. Technology, thanks to business technology, we've been able to now run models that allow us to run significantly more simulations and get even better quality results. As I mentioned earlier, we have a integrated resource plan in good standing with the Western Area Power Administration. We plan to do another one in 2021, at least in 2021, or potentially earlier if we assess material changes in our service territory, significant load changes or a meaningful change to SPP accreditation policy or the bullets that you see in your screen. We have the option of doing it earlier. It's not an easy task. It's something that requires a lot of resources, and we want to be mindful when we do an integrated resource plan that it is warranted and that we will get the benefit from it. If nothing, if we don't see any material change there, we will have to do one for sure by 2021 to meet Western's requirement. I think this is like the 5th time that I mentioned the sub-hourly dispatch platform. And the graphs in there are really only provided for illustrative purposes, just to show you the thousands of different iterations that we have that go into the model on fuel assumptions and power prices, weather patterns, all of those things that come into play. There's not going to be a test on this. Really important here, and I think that the planning process is a conversation that we had with the system subcommittee. The planning process is an incredibly important function that supports the delivery of results on many other strategic directives. You could argue that it's all of them, but really directly on competitive rates, reliability, customer satisfaction, environmental stewardship, economic development, stakeholder outreach, and enterprise risk management. So it's this SD9, this resource planning function that allows us to optimize and figure out how do we best use our resources to deliver on all of the other directives that the board is putting forward. So I'm very pleased with the work that the team is doing. Very, very proud of the team. They're probably some of the smartest people that I've met here in the district are working on these models, and just very, very impressed with the team. So with that, the System Management Committee reviewed. I believe they accepted the monitoring report, and it will be presented to the board for approval on Thursday. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I think it is in compliance.
Oh,
yeah.
So that's one, and then the next one is the System Management Committee was solicited for clarifications or feedback report regarding the policy on June 20th and July 6th. We haven't received a formal clarification or feedback. We've also discussed that while the Public Information Committee continues to work on SD7, that we want to potentially wait for that work to complete and talk about SD9. But at this point, I'll yield to the board to answer any questions.
Any questions on the presentation? Okay, thank you very much.
I have one question. One thing as far as the statement of the goal of resource planning, it goes back to our initial thing of being clear, brevity, and everything. If you look at what it says, we actually have the how in that resource planning goal. And I think that we could easily take that out because what they said, where it's highlighted in the black is actually what we're doing to attain the goal. I think we can restate it, and this is, I'm wordsmithing here, but something like provide a supply and demand resource plan to adapt to the rapidly changing electric utility business environment to ensure reliable, competitive, cost-effective, environmentally sensitive service to our customers. In other words, you get rid of the how in there, because I think the how is stated in there, which we don't need in the goal. Because it is actually underneath, to attain this goal, we're going to provide resources and analytical capability to adequately assess OPPD's integrated resource portfolio. It would go underneath instead.
I think at this time, it would be good then to say, yes, we would like to refine this policy, push it to systems, set a date on getting feedback from the full board, and then we'll schedule a systems meeting to discuss SD9.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to we're not really changing the policy as much as wordsmithing, just taking that one sentence out and putting, which we've done before in other policies.
That's changing the policy.
It's changing it. Yeah, probably.
And I'll throw out a couple of other thoughts.
Yeah.
So that's a good thought. It was pointed out to me by Javier, and Mary quickly agreed in the discussion on Friday that it is very focused on how, where the rest of the SDs don't. And I'm of two minds right now, and would like some immediate feedback, but yeah, let's go to Systems Committee to work on it a little bit more. One is, we see currently in SD7, but a specific request for things like percentage of renewable energy. So there are some specific goals that are set up. In resource planning around the country, there are specific tactics that are often put in those things, such as your resource of first choice is energy efficiency. So that's kind of one way to move on this. The other way to move on this is to get rid of that how altogether and try to provide maybe a completely different SB on how do we manage change, and how do we manage the market transformation? Our IEM marketplace teams are all working on the non-traditional resources as well. It's a great example of resource elements that, if pulled together, what would the board say are we moving? Do we have a particular model that we're working with? Is there a rapidity or that we want to have or not want to have? So those are kind of the two different ways that I'm thinking of, and I'm just open to how that's how I'm thinking of framing up the discussion, but I'm certainly open to other input.
So I'll send an email out and set a date on getting feedback to provide back to the systems committee and set that meeting. Does that sound good? Okay.
Thank you.
That it? Report?
That's the report. Thank you
Great.
very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next committee report is governance, and Director Chairman gave the committee his absent today, so I guess I'll take it. We have two items. One's a reporting item and one is an action item, and why don't I turn them both over to Martin?
Sure. The first item is that one individual who was severed from the company. That agreement was in excess of $50,000, and so we report those to the board when they occur. So that's the reporting item. The second item is any questions on that one?
No. Who's that employee? Was it Fort Calhoun employee?
It was, his name is in the other attachment.
Eric?
Yeah, Eric Matsky. Okay, the other item is the annual health report. As you're aware, in 1991, the Board of Directors authorized the formation of a self-funded administrative services only health plan. The health plan includes the health insurance programs and dental program offered by the district. It is subject to the Political Subdivision Self-Funding Benefits Act set forth in sections 13-1601 to 13-1626 revised statutes of Nebraska Benefits Act. In order to comply with the Benefits Act, we are required to prepare an annual health plan report and report on the required reserves. We do have two funded reserves that are maintained in accordance with the Benefits Act. One is to account for timing delays in claims filing and processing, which is referred to as an incurred but not presented reserve. And a second reserve ensures that funds will be available during each ensuing month and is called the Monthly Claims and Expenses Reserve. The annual report is attached. Mikkel Pinder, who is our Director of Total Rewards, is here, and Vicki Lee, who is our Senior Benefits Consultant and can help answer any detailed questions that you might have about the report. If we look at the report, what you'll see is about a $3 million reduction in expenses from 2016 to 2017, and that was largely due to claims cost. So our experience was less in 2017 than it was in 16. And, pardon? We were healthier, yeah, which drove a reduction in premiums for us for 2018 as well.
Is that on the $3 million reduction? Is that total, or is that just the active employees and their families, or does that include the?
It's total.
Okay.
It's total.
Is there specifically one area that stands out amongst that drove the $3 million, would you say? Is there one particular area that?
No, I think we just had lower overall claims cost, and a lot of what we see that drives our claim costs really high are the people who have very significant health issues which drive high cost claims. The other is specialty drug, which can drive our costs a lot higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next year, could we maybe get a comparison from when next year be 18 to 19, I guess, instead of just that current year as a snapshot? The specific breakdowns.
There's a comparison.
There is,
Okay.
it is in there.
Okay.
It is in there.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that in here. It's right here, yeah.
Okay.
Since we are self-funded, yeah, I know that we are doing some things as far as wellness or prevention and that. Can you speak to that a little bit? I don't know if somebody else will do that, or if we have, but if you can speak as far as what type of wellness programs we have, what type of things are we doing any education to our employees as far as, prescription stuff and how they can save money? Are they looking at how much it's costing, the district for this, and how can we cut down cost on this?
Yeah. Mikkel, do you want to address some of the wellness issues and programs?
Yes.
Maybe you can come up here, yeah. Vicki might have to come too.
Good morning.
Morning.
As you may or may not know, we do have a wellness program now that is actually somewhat significant for an organization this size and somewhat robust. So as you would have noted, the health management fees went up a little over
Yeah, I
last
noticed that.
year. And that is because we have now added new services. So in addition to Livongo, and you know, we deal really with certain chronic illnesses. So there's heart disease specifically, diabetes, and things of that nature. So we have now incorporated new management companies to help us to assist our employees with managing those diseases.
Good.
So that's one thing that we're doing. Secondly, as I was mentioning earlier, the wellness program, we're trying to get our employees to be more active. So we have the Walk for Wellness program and other initiatives throughout the year to help with things like that. There is, of course, we're going to continue our wellness screening so that people know what their numbers are. Do you know what your blood sugar numbers are? Do you know what your blood pressure is? Things of that nature. So there are lots of things that we are doing to help our employees understand their own health issues and help them address those.
So, as an example, for our organization, and certainly I've worked in health departments before, that you do an annual survey, and then that is related to the fee structure for your health plan? So,
What do you mean annual
no,
survey?
you don't do that.
What do you mean by annual survey?
So, do you smoke? When was the last
Oh,
time you
that.
smoked?
Oh,
And
yeah.
what is
Oh,
your,
yeah, that,
and so
yeah,
you do
yeah,
that survey, yes?
Yes, that is part of
Okay.
That's a part of
Then,
the
then the
health.
second
Wellness
question is it an incentive, is it required? Or if not required, is there incentive to encourage you to take it?
The incentive to do our wellness screening is that you get a $50 gift certificate.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good that we have the new healthcare manager, the nurse care managers for people who do have the chronic diseases. I think that will help cut down. What type of negotiations, or who helps us with negotiations as far as prescriptions?
So Aon is our benefits consultant, and they work with us on various different opportunities to reduce costs in those areas.
Okay. And have we been able to reduce costs as far as prescriptions in the past few years or
I think we've
not?
done some. Specialty drugs continue to just kind of spiral out of control, and we're particularly watching as new cancer treatments are developed. They will be very, very expensive. So, you know, we're keeping an eye on that. Aon is doing a good job of working with our vendors to try and reduce costs where we can. We do have several requests for proposal out this year just to look at our benefits providers and see if there's some opportunity for savings with them.
Yeah,
So,
and then are you pushing the generic drugs versus the,
absolutely.
is that usually the first choice? Are they told they must take the generic unless there's a specific order?
I think we do drive that. There's a higher cost if you go with the branded drugs.
Right.
To the employee.
To the employee. Is it a
To the
high, is it a
employer.
high enough cost is what I'm saying? Because sometimes these are 20, 30, 40 times the amount as far as a generic.
I think it's high enough. The issue that we always have is that people trust what their doctors tell them, and if their doctor tells them you need the branded drug, they're likely to take the branded
Yeah.
drug. But we do try to push generics as much as we possibly can, and Vicki and the team provide a lot of education around
And
that.
that could be with generic too, say,
Yes.
help everybody as far as, you don't want your fees, because the employees also have to pay more each year for this too. I think there was a
Correct.
7.5 or 8% increase
Yeah.
last year. You can perhaps decrease this by, cutting costs on your own, be more aware.
Yes.
Is there an
Absolutely.
active program about that, I guess is what I'm asking? About how you as a consumer should be aware of what you're paying for?
Yeah, I think one of Vicki's passions is about consumer-driven healthcare.
Good.
And so as we do have an RFP out right now for our medical claims provider and prescription provider. One of the things they are looking at in what those people are providing is whether or not they have some kind of a software system that allows people to compare and contrast costs. So it's one of the things we are looking for going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you
So-
said,
Go ahead.
one other thing, are we going out for another insurance company? Are we looking at that at all?
Yes, we have an RFP out right now.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I guess I should add as well, we are actively putting together a total rewards communication plan, and a part of that is going to involve doing exactly what you just mentioned. So in addition to it perhaps coming externally from a vendor, we will also be driving that information through to our employees.
Good.
So that was a question I had.
Yeah.
So the interventions that we're developing to promote health is done both by the external vendor and our own
Yes.
internal?
Correct, that is correct.
And it's a new vendor this year? Is that what I heard?
This is the first year we've had Aon, yeah.
Came last year, so we've had him for a full year.
Yeah, so we've had them for one full year, and they did a really good job in the year that we've had them, so we're continuing to move forward with them.
Yeah.
They are coordinating all of the RFPs for us.
And that's an outcomes-based review after a year with them,
Yes.
yeah, what their performance is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because
And we'll be
Because
voting
if you
on
look
that.
at I just think everybody should realize how much we do pay in health insurance, you know. $47 million this year, $50 million last year. And we do have the OPEB and expenses are in there also. And of which that's 22 million is the, post-pension.
Right.
And
It's
pension.
not post-pension, that's current medical claims, correct? OPEB.
OPEB.
And then also the retirees.
And the trust retirees is 22 million, is that right?
No, that's not just
Which
for
one-
retirees.
which is the retirees then?
So the other post-employment benefit plan A covers current medical claims. So we put money into a fund so that we can pay the claims.
Okay,
And that's in addition to the contributions that the employees make.
okay.
Post-employment benefits plan B is for people that were hired after 2008. We set up a fund so that we can pay our share of the insurance premium cost.
And then do we have a breakdown of what active employees versus retirees?
We do. We did not include it in the health plan report, but I can provide some of that
Yeah,
information.
I'd like to see
you
that.
if you'd
Is
like
that
to
in
see it.
addition to this? The 47
So
million?
we have, our retirees are covered mostly under Medicare, and then we also have a Medicare supplement plan.
Right.
That's provided if they're over 65. If they're under 65, then we cover them under our active employee
Well,
plan.
we have a pretty fair number of retirees under the age of 65, don't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
We didn't hear the question.
Number of retirees under 65?
We have about roughly 765
That's a lot of people.
retirees that are over 65.
Under 65.
Okay. Okay, if there's no more questions, then we'll be voting on Thursday to approve this report. And that concludes governance.
Thank you for the
Bef-
talking points. by the way.
Absolutely.
Okay. Before we go on to the next item, which is somewhat of a lengthy presentation, let me take a short 10-minute break, okay?
Talking about
Great
wellness, everybody walk a little, huh? Stretch.
People I know that buy insurance through the company, it's like
Yeah, I'm gonna, obviously, Troy Vai is sitting in for Mo today, who's not able to be here today. And so Troy has kind of led our integrated energy marketplace work, and this is kind of the last presentation of all that work. We've had 7 presentations to the board over the course of the last 7 or 8 or 9 months. And so it's great work by the team, and this is the final one on distributed energy resource strategy. And so I'm going to turn it over to Troy, and then he'll have the team introduce themselves and introduce Tim McAreevy, who kind of led this segment on the DER strategy. So Troy?
Right. So we kind of settled on DER as a focal point, because if you think about the future of electric services, and if you think about the rapid technological advances they've made in certain technologies such as distributed solar and batteries and things of that nature, we know as an organization we have to really start planning for those as a future and figure out how we want to interact with those. It was kind of interesting as a team when we started down this process, we started looking for definitions of DER, which we found can be quite different. Some could be very specific, others would very broad with many different options considered distributed energy resources. What was kind of interesting though, there was a general theme between all of them though, that they kind of agreed on the fact that it's an object that generates electricity or basically can store and reproduce energy. Now again, there are many different definitions, but they all had that one piece in common, and you'll see as we walk through this with Tim, we considered several different options. Our focus was really on the customer side. So what are customers wanting? Where may they head? Looking at some of the other states, specifically California and the Western Coast, what are customers doing in this area? We wanted to think about how does OPPD plan for the future of these technologies? How do we think about how they'll integrate into our system? What steps we need to take to enable customers who want this technology, which is really important. When we started this, we definitely had a mindset of neutrality. So not defining whether they're good or bad, but just how do we help the customer who wants to take these next steps. And I think that's probably different than some of the utilities and the way they've handled it in the past. So we wanted to make sure we kept our mind very open. At this time, I'd like to kind of acknowledge we got Tim McAreevy, who led a lot of the work on the initiative. He'll be doing performing the presentation today. And then we have a group behind us. If you could stand, please. These are our core members, and I'd like for them to introduce themselves, name, and maybe what you do for the company. These folks were doing the heavy lifting each day, a lot of the analysis. There was probably another 20 or so throughout the organization that had some touch point with this, but these folks were heavily involved.
My name's Mark Pohl. I'm a supervisor in our customer service group. We've got a team of electrical service designers that do line extension work, so anytime there's new business or residential property development that's taking place, my team works to figure out how we're going to get the power from our grid to where that facility is going to go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Triblisco. I'm an engineer in our operations department right now, supporting our dispatchers, and I also have a background in distribution planning.
Good morning. I'm Al Wunderlich. I manage the market research group. My team worked on the qualitative and quantitative research with residential and commercial customers.
Hi, I'm Jay Anderson. I'm involved in the demand side management efforts at OPPD.
I'm Jim Helmberger. I'm principal engineer IEM. For the last year and a half or so, I've been most of my time on the IEM team. Prior to that, I spent about 20 to 22 years in T&D substation system protection. That included working with distributed generation. Prior to that, I was in consulting, and I worked on the customer side on distributed generation, so I've kind of been on both sides of the table.
So you can see we have a broad group from all parts of the organization, and they've spent a lot of time and effort on this subject. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Tim to start walking through the presentation.
And I'll just share one more thing about Tim. Tim's our director of our strategic sourcing group here at OPPD, and has done a significant amount of work around cost reductions relative to our supply side contracts and really strengthening that. So in his full-time job, that's what he does, and he's been spending a lot of time obviously on the IEM team as well. So Tim, thank you for being here.
Thank you. That's a great point. That's the one addition. The folks that were on this team were doing their normal jobs too. So extra hours, extra time, extra effort beyond what they would normally have in their normal job. So it's been fantastic to see the team pull together and try to prioritize work to be able to perform this function. So.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad that Tim acknowledged the perfectly natural connection between supply chain management and distributed energy strategy, right? While I do that by day, I've been fortunate in a past life to spend time doing other things besides supply chain, such as marketing and corporate strategy and business development. So this was a fun departure from the day job into some past experience that I've had. I'm really honored to work with these gentlemen that you met, and Wendell Young of our customer service business unit is not here today. I'm honored to have worked with them, and I appreciate their patience with me and not being an industry veteran of the energy industry. They have taught me a great deal as we went through this journey, and I intend to make liberal use of the expertise in the room that I don't have as questions come up. In our discussion today, what we're going to try to do is frame the question that we were trying to answer when we took on this initiative. We're going to describe how we defined DER in our project work. We're going to talk a bit about the industry context of DER, where OPPD is today, what our customers' perspectives are, and where we see OPPD heading tomorrow as it relates to distributed energy. Probably a couple of key undercurrents to our work and to the conversation today that I'll share with you. One is that we'll make assertions about where the market is and where adoption is. And I would just stress that we intend those not to be absolute statements, but rather statements of general direction, right? Acknowledging that the adoption of distributed energy technologies for customers is a very individualized decision. So these will not be absolute statements. So the cross-functional team that we worked together as, and also that covered a number of subject matter experts from throughout the business, we really leveraged external, internal, customer, and stakeholder data to answer the question of what processes and resources should OPPD adopt and implement to serve those customers who desire these technologies, and with a goal of improving the OPPD customer relationship and to position us or keep us positioned as their distributed energy partner. We held an important belief as we answered that question that customers who made a choice that these technologies were right for them would find a way to adopt and find a way to do so. As Troy mentioned, IEM was segmented into a number of sub-initiatives. And while we won't draw a distinction between DER work and all of those sub-initiatives, we thought one was particularly important, and that was non-traditional solutions that you heard about just in the last month or two. It would be natural to think of that distinction as one of technology, but rather it's more a distinction of the impetus that may have us consider those technologies. So DER focused on the customer, while non-traditional solutions focused on OPPD's system. Further, we were addressing customer-driven needs that would explore standard and custom distributed energy products and services, usually behind the meter. Whereas NTS was addressing OPPD-driven needs with a focus on system planning that could result in the implementation of non-traditional solutions, including some of the distributed energy technologies we'll talk about today, usually on our distribution system. Troy also alluded that there are many technologies that could be rightly described under an umbrella of distributed energy. As our team considered that, we narrowed the scope to a core set of 3 that we considered to be the mainframe of what OPPD customers are interested in. The first is solar. I would note here that we initially considered that community solar may have fallen under the umbrella of DER, being in essence a customer-initiated, customer-requested distributed technology, but we also acknowledge that that was a completely separate initiative that was addressing that opportunity that this body has heard about already. Generators was another key component of the project scope, primarily for commercial customers. And finally, energy storage, so distributed battery storage. What I would note about the strategy you'll hear about is that while we focused on these as project scope, that strategy is built to accommodate other technologies that may emerge or reemerge in the future that customers may be interested in. So let's start to examine the industry context that I referenced of DER technologies by considering current adoption. Customers hear a lot of information in the media about DER technologies, so much so that it would be easy to think that we're way behind, right, or that adoption is at overwhelming levels. But actual current adoption remains low in the industry compared to overall generation. For solar, for example, there's about 12.5 gigawatts of net metered capacity, which is 1.2% of all U.S. generating capacity. For OPPD, we have approximately 579 kilowatts of capacity across about 76 customers, so that's 0.002%, or excuse me, 0.02% of OPPD's generating capacity. For generators in the U.S., there's approximately 3.96 gigawatt of less than a megawatt fossil fuel internal combustion generation, or 0.4% of all U.S. generating capacity. For OPPD, we have about 31 megawatts, and to arrive at that number, we look as a proxy of customers that are on our 467L rate. It's about 1.2% of our own generating capacity. And in battery storage in the U.S., there's approximately 431 megawatts of total grid storage, or 0.04% of U.S. generating capacity. We have about 10 kilowatts, as described above, across 2 sites in the OPPD territory. So the purpose of sharing these numbers is to acknowledge that what we hear and see can lead us to one perception, and not a statement of rightness or wrongness, but the actual adoption is lower than perhaps perception would create. To narrow our focus a bit, we also examined how other utilities were addressing DER in their markets. So we took a look at a number of case studies across a number of utilities, the detail of which, all of which we won't go into today. But some key takeaways were that area utilities seem to have minimal participation in DER outside of their community solar programs. That community solar provides lower initial cost and broader access for those customers seeking a solar option. We saw that utility-sponsored DER programs can influence customer participation, but dependent on other key adoption factors. An example of which would be KCP&L, right? Had adoption of solar programs in the Missouri part of their service territory. The other component of that was there was a Missouri state law mandate around those, or offering of those rebates that KCP&L offered. We found that utility-specific circumstances also influence DER options and programs. So a good example of that, we believe, is Green Mountain Power. So if you follow the headlines and read articles about Green Mountain Power, they're doing some very interesting and very innovative things around distributed energy. As you dig deeper into those, they are beneficial to the customer, but they're often also addressing an issue in Green Mountain Power's grid, be it reliability or maintenance cost. So again, our point there is that the utility-specific circumstances tend to drive programs. We'd also say that economics generally drive customer behavior even when a full suite of services is offered by a utility. Good example of that would be Georgia Power, right? They have overall low rates, overall pretty good reliability, offered a good program, and had high initial interest, but ultimately low adoption because the economics simply weren't there for the customer. So continuing to narrow our focus a bit on the DER work, we examined our current role in supporting customer DER needs. Now, I should define current a little bit here. So generally, this is a picture of our participation in the DER value chain overall. I would say that we are getting some valuable experience in supporting a couple of very large customers that are early in adoption of DER technologies. So some of these things are starting to change as we speak. But generally speaking, on generating and producing customer knowledge and interest, we've got limited information available for customers on renewable energy options and DER technologies. Those messages do tend to be safety focused, both in the interest of the customer and in OPPD employees, but there's not really an economic message that helps the customer determine whether those technologies are right for them. Also internally, we have a lot of dedicated people working on different aspects of DER, but overall leadership of our strategy tends to be a little clouded. On DER system sales, design, and overall solutions, we offer very limited options to our customers today, mostly around commercial and industrial generators for resiliency purposes, with some financing options that are very infrequently used. On DER approval and installation, our involvement is largely manual with a paper-based process for a compliance review, and we're plagued by inconsistent record keeping and technology tracking. So when we talked about adoption numbers earlier, you heard me indicate approximately, because one of the gaps we identified is an opportunity to capture more detailed information about the technologies our customers adopt. And in terms of DER operations and maintenance services, really no organized offering to speak of. So with an industry, utility, and a current OPPD presence as a backdrop, and working with Market Research Group and Al's team to assess customer perspectives, we wanted to see what those perspectives were and what our customers told us. So we talked to 569 residential customers through the OPPD Power Panel and an additional focus group chat session. We also talked to 460 small and medium commercial customers, also through a Power Panel survey, and supplemented that with face-to-face focus groups. Those commercial customers had really broad representation in the North American Industrial Classification System sectors, including agriculture, construction, finance and insurance, environmental services, professional, scientific and technical services, and accommodation and food services. And the summation of the findings on the residential are as follows. Not a statement of where we are today, but in the context of what role could OPPD play, residential customers believe that OPPD has a natural role in education, suggesting preferred vendors, and providing tools to inform their decisions about distributed energy technologies. Their perception about our role in actually providing equipment and service was less clear than on the earlier segment. That interest in us to provide operations and maintenance services was there. And we found that customers were generally familiar with solar technologies, much less so with generator and storage technologies. Overall, the top 6 of 10 purchase drivers that residential customers spoke of and cited were economic related. It included things like equipment cost, performance guarantees, good products and service reviews, product warranties, payments and financing, and free installation.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Our role in this, residential or commercial, forget providing equipment. Do we qualify technologies? I mean, do we say, if you're going to hook into our system, it has to have this minimum threshold of whatever, power quality or anything? I mean, Are we trying to control what gets attached to us?
I appreciate that question. I'm going to defer to Jim or one of the team members for some specifics.
Short answer is yes, but the majority of the products that are commercially available meet most of our requirements deal with the details of how it's connected and how it behaves or how it's programmed.
So as long as we're aware of them implementing the DER, yes. If they're doing it on their own and we don't know they're doing it, then we would not have the same amount of information or influence.
Okay.
So in looking at the findings from our commercial customers, it was interesting to note that many of them brought out a basic that they view our role to maintain a focus on affordable, reliable electricity. And that offering or those comments were made in the context of if those things are present, DER technology may be less attractive. They also saw our potential role including providing qualified contractors, ensuring those contractors are trained and that installations are done correctly. They would expect us to provide education, to be an information source, and some were open to looking to us as a financial source for DER. And 6 of the top 10, though these were interspersed in the top 10, of their purchase drivers were economic related as well. Though some of the others that were interspersed in there were the physical aspect of the equipment, customer-friendly permitting process, or a one-stop shop experience for those technologies. And what was interesting is that was indicative of the responses from commercial customers tended to vary a little bit, whereas residential tended to be consistent from top to bottom. And the reasons for that tend to be the unique nature of adoption for each potential commercial customer. They look at their own business, what technology might they need to accomplish their business goals. So as a means of triangulating the customer perspective between our own day-to-day knowledge and what our customers told us directly, we approached other stakeholders that interact with our customers. So we talked to a commercial developer, 3 locally based but nationwide engineering firms, 35 members of a local builders association, and an area electrical inspector. And the summation of the findings were as follows. The one we particularly quoted is our customers, the bottom line for clients is economics, not specific energy technologies. The electrical inspector confirmed that applications for solar installations are quite minimal today, and that solar and storage technologies are interesting, but customers are showing little or no interest, so they're not offering proactively at this time unless specifically asked. So between all of the data points of high media coverage and high enthusiasm in the media of DER technologies and low adoption by our customers today, we wrestled with how would we boil down adoption factors that we should monitor going forward related to distributed energy technologies. And as we thought through those factors and researched, we boiled it down to these factors on the left. So rates, net metering and mandates under regulation, under regional markets, alternatives, capacity and reliability, and other factors such as solar irradiance and land availability. What we attempt to do on the right side is not make absolute statements, but rather directional or bookend characteristics that make, across those factors, make DER less attractive or more attractive. So clearly, in a rates perspective, if overall low rates offer less room or less of an opportunity for payback of a technology investment, high base rates may offer a greater opportunity for payback of a financial investment. On net metering, where there is retail up through usage and then avoided cost, that tends to not incent DER or make the payback less attractive, where there's full retail for all energy produced, would tend to make that investment more attractive from a payback perspective. Mandates are an important factor, so where there are no state or local renewable portfolio standards would tend to make DER less attractive for adoption. Of course, mandates make that and require that to be more attractive. In the regional market, alternatives we find such as high wind penetration, community solar offerings, maybe automatic throwover services for resiliency for businesses, the availability of those tend to make DER technologies less attractive. What tends to make it more attractive in that factor is where there are only fossil fuels or only limited renewable alternatives for customers. On the capacity factor, where there's low cost capacity and someone is less likely to have to turn to customers for capacity, would tend to make those technologies less attractive. More expensive or constrained capacity may make that more attractive. Reliability is a clear indicator of DER attractiveness. Solar irradiance, such as low or moderate irradiance in a portion of the U.S., would tend to make that financial benefit less attractive. Where the solar irradiance is quite high would make it more attractive. And in land availability, which is the one that we indicate OPPD's relative position on the right and more attractive, is in land availability. So relatively cheap, easy and available land, such as in a suburban or rural setting, does tend to make that more attractive. And expensive, limited, and constrained land availability as in an urban setting would tend to make that less attractive. So as we thought about these factors, we believe they have two key uses for us. One is a filter through which to process DER news and developments both nationally, regionally, and in our service territory. And it also indicates signposts for us to monitor to signal potential changes in customer behavior and customer adoption. So our discussion to this point may suggest that there may not be significant shifts needed in where OPPD is today. But as I qualified earlier, what we want to note is that generally speaking, today's value equation leans toward the economic factors, and generally customers are telling us that those economic factors are outweighing other factors in their decision process. But we clearly can look to the future and see that that is likely to change over time, and whether that means through changes in the economic factors themselves or greater importance placed on non-economic factors, it would seem clear that customers are likely to adopt these technologies at a higher rate. What we'd want to stress throughout is each of these decisions will be on a customer by customer basis based on their own value equation. And from their feedback, what we also know is that if they do adopt, they anticipate a greater role from their energy partner. So to summarize where we were to date, we found that while industry enthusiasm for DER is high, the economic factors, which are the key decision maker or decision factors for most, are challenging in our area. As a result, we see that wide-scale DER adoption is unlikely in the next few years, though we know that some customers will adopt earlier for their own economic or non-economic reasons. And some of that near-term adoption is likely to be high profile, with a great opportunity for us to serve customers and to learn these new technologies. And lastly, that we have an opportunity to fill a market leadership void and mitigate a risk of third-party involvement in them playing a leadership role in serving our customers' needs that choose these technologies. Seizing that opportunity to play a leadership role for DER technologies would require a more robust role in the DER value chain. So potential roles for us and partners across those same four value chain buckets under customer knowledge and interest would look like quality information and support for customers and employees seeking information on renewable energy options and DER technologies. fact-based, clear, concise, multi-channel messaging that provides thought leadership and supports that energy partner perspective that they look to OPPD for. We'd want to provide pertinent facts, be as customer specific as possible to enable a balanced decision on the part of our customers and to support those decisions. Under DER system sales, design, and solutions, we would see an opportunity to provide comprehensive and trusted solutions for all customer classes and needs, and partner with trusted DER providers to provide those solutions. We think an approach like that, to partner with trusted providers, provides faster implementation, lower risk, enables that as a variable cost, and an ability to learn from those partners. For approval and installation, we'd see improved processes, some of which are already being undertaken and improved, to utilize online and frictionless reviews, consistent and centralized up-to-date technology tracking of our customers, and to coordinate work again with trusted DER providers, to maintain an operational stability and safety focus on the technologies that are employed in the field. And for operational maintenance and operations and maintenance services, we see an opportunity to support services beyond the initial installation, such as troubleshooting, maintenance, repair, decommissioning, system expansion, etc. Also likely with trade partners. The next steps to build the necessary foundation and to establish that necessary value chain presence would happen in stages, and we suggest as follows. In the near term of roughly a 0 to 2 year time frame, we have a number of foundational steps that we would undertake, one of which is already well underway, and that's the establishment of centralized DER ownership and accountability in the organization, be the development and deployment of customer and employee education, the development of DER trade partnerships, as I mentioned, the design and implementation of a DER approval process improvements, and lastly, the establishment of an internal OPPD DER database. In parallel, we're finding, as I mentioned earlier, larger customers that are already heading down this DER path approaching us, and we're already working with some large commercial customers that tend to require more customized solutions, so we're already engaged with those in ways we may not have traditionally been, and we're already supporting them and learning a great deal. Between that near-term and prospective longer-term rollout, we want to monitor the customer and the industry trends and confirm and stay updated on what customers are telling us. So in the 2 year or longer time frame, we could see an opportunity for distributed storage rate and battery management offerings, resiliency and backup power offerings, and probably most importantly and most comprehensively, DER solutions provider for residential and small and medium commercial customers. So extending in a more programmatic way those lessons that we're learning with the large commercial customers today. We indicate community solar at the bottom because throughout and in parallel as our community solar program advances, we believe that a number of customers will look at that as a first option because of that lower cost of entry for their distributed energy resource needs. And my tab system worked well until that point. All right. So while larger next steps will take place as defined, the work of developing these plans has already spurred initial progress in a number of areas. Internally, I indicated that we've identified an OPPD lead role through work with Ms. Comstock's area that fits nicely with the product development strategy that she and her team are building out. We're monitoring DER technology developments and improving existing processes. We're developing safety training of our line crews around these technologies and exploring tools for customer education. We're aligning and integrating with our electric vehicle, non-traditional solutions, and community solar efforts, and we're already exploring improved tracking tools. Externally, we've recently added a Connect DER product, which is a meter socket adapter that facilitates some DER connections. We're supporting larger customers exploring DER as a means to learn and explore and support their unique needs. And as a part of that process, we're already having the opportunity to explore partnerships with providers in the area.
Excuse me, that Connect DER product, is that the one that Wendell discussed with us as
It
far
is.
as the solar?
It is.
Okay, just clarify that.
So I will defer to questions from the board or the senior management team. And this is the part where the liberal use of expertise may come in.
I have a whole bunch of questions from Mr. Moody, so. Okay, and he's quite, he starts at the top. Which SDs are driving the analysis?
So I didn't provide, I don't have my notes on that, but I would say for certain mission and vision, right? And then understanding how OPPD's mission and vision, thank you, Mark, extends to distributed energy technologies. Perfect timing, as always. SD2 rates, so understanding future adoption and the economics of these technologies and rates required for those technologies, as well as implications on rates for other customers. We believe SD5, customer satisfaction, certainly how do we support those customers that choose to adopt these technologies. Safety, in that we have accurate record keeping and appropriate training for our teams in the field around these technologies. We think environmental stewardship certainly has a bearing, as well as we know some customers may choose to adopt for environmental reasons, and how do we support their selections there. We think also that SD11 economic development, as new customers or existing customers choose to expand, they may be looking at these technologies, and we would want to be in a position to support those needs. And we also think enterprise risk management, SD15, comes into play as well in monitoring and adapting to industry changes and to mitigate risk and to remain relevant there.
Okay. The next thing is scope, and I think I know the answer to this, but why wasn't energy efficiency examined and included? And if not, where and when do we get that information about energy efficiency?
So I will defer to a number of the group. I would say that while as Troy alluded earlier, that often in a DER discussion, energy efficiency could be included in scope. We thought that customers' adoption of technology and technology itself already has a dramatic impact on energy efficiency in our district. And as a result, we narrowed our focus toward what felt like more future technologies around distributed energies, and predominantly around solar generation and storage.
Yeah, I think real quick, so in one of the earlier conversations around one of the integrated energy marketplace recommendations was how do we utilize demand side management and energy efficiency for system deferrals, right? So that was really kind of a system look at how do we look at accelerating energy efficiency or demand side management, and is there a likelihood to be able to do that? I think we currently have a demand side management energy efficiency initiative going on right now. We'll be kind of going through a review process of that to look to the future. We'll bring back that information back to the board when we're prepared and have that information, and the basis of that coming up probably within the next, by year end probably, or maybe sooner. So we'll have a relook at that based on some of the changes and technology changes that may be going on. I am going to show a slide that the board saw on the use of Nest and our AC management at the President's report, just to show the impact of that and how some of those technologies and services that we provided to customers and how it has reduced our peak demand during those peak days and created that value and benefit and what that long-term impact is for us. This was really about DER, and so we already currently have an initiative in play around DSM and energy efficiency. We'll be looking at updating that with current information. We'll bring that back to the board when we're in a position to share that.
Just to reinforce his question, though,
Yeah, I
and back
think
to your
we need to do
point
that, too.
earlier, is
Yeah.
that just DER oftentimes does include energy efficiency as part of the options. It's on the customer side of things.
The big thing is the education of the customer and what new things are too, other
And
than
we
just
have a
DSL.
lot of information that we give to the customer and share with the customer today on our website about energy efficiency and the work that we do, the community activity that we do and education that we do around that. Again, as Tim, most clearly put it, this initiative was really focused on the technology changes. Typically on the distributed energy resources, energy efficiency in most cases is not really included unless it's a mandate that may be coming from a regulatory entity and how they incorporate it all together. But we wanted to really separate that out as a technological, hey, here's our strategy around distributed energy resources. So we'll be coming back to the board on any updates that we may have around our DSM energy efficiency initiatives.
And this is another segue into that, is as far as the pace of change as far as distributed energy. He said, he says the information provided is a snapshot which is helpful but doesn't tell the whole story. What's the pace of change, and what is the pace expected to be in the future, and what variables will drive the change?
Thank you, Director McGuire. I think that we covered
Actually,
what
this
we
is Mr.
believe to
Murphy,
be
too.
some of the key
I thought they
variables.
covered that, but yeah.
These questions came before the presentations.
So you're able to answer that, good for you.
I think Al has it.
I may add something to that. As far as the pace of change, I think it depends partly on the segment you're looking at.
Can you come to the?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
I think it depends partly on the segment you're looking at and also on which technology you're looking at. On one end of the extreme, like with the larger rate 231 customers, they're very familiar with generators. A lot of them have generators. So that's probably a little further down the line. You get to the other end, like with the online chats, we had residential customers talking about solar and generators and batteries. We had people commenting like, I'd never heard of batteries or not familiar with batteries at all until I sat in on this discussion. And so again, it kind of depends on which technology you're looking at. I think solar has a little more familiarity. Batteries probably more at the beginning. Generators somewhere in between there. So it kind of depends.
So can I weigh in on at this point as well? Thanks, by the way, for offering the article on the Utility Dive, June 14th, 2018, as distributed solar expands, can utility system planning keep up? What I found most interesting, and so that was in the board director's packet, what I found most interesting about that article is that many utilities now have a customer adoption model that they're using to be a little more predictive on what the adoption rates are for each utility. Of the variables that I saw here today, what isn't included is kind of the social behavioral side of things, peer pressure. And certainly that's, I guess I would just encourage us to have a well-defined customer adoption model and to be more predictive in that. Obviously, it's an investment, maybe we don't have money, but it's something, it's a tool that is now popping up among utilities. Maybe we are in flyover country and it's not happening here as fast, but certainly it's a best practice, I think, that is emerging.
I
Go ahead,
want to look
respond,
at
please.
where we're at with familiarity too. It was interesting as we discussed these qualitatively. We share a description, we make it pretty bland, vanilla, because you want them to think about the concept, the idea, not the presentation. And then we started showing, examples of solar, battery, and it was kind of interesting as, people looked at solar, aesthetically, they were less pleased, they found it less attractive. As we showed them battery and they weren't familiar with it, they were saying like, wow, that's more appealing than I thought. So again, as they learn, you will see some differences there, but I think it's still fairly basic right now.
Sure, so it'd be good to know, you had the snapshot, here's what generation is compared to overall generation, But a better look at this, from my viewpoint, is the adoption of innovations, right? So where are we on that curve?
So
Go ahead.
I would say, and this is all anecdotally because I don't have the specific numbers, I can probably get you the specific numbers, but I would say from 2016 to 2017, we saw a bump up in request where I would say there were a couple a month so it was a marked difference in what we had for, say, solar installations in the past. But 2018, we have them trickling in, but it's not been any like huge jumps that I would see.
Sure, but if you go from 2 to 4, it doesn't sound like a lot, but exponential, right?
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is from 2016 to 17, it jumped up. 2017, 2018 seems fairly comparable in the request.
I'm glad you're looking at that. Thank you.
And I appreciate your comment on the customer trending and behavior and adoption. I think both the EV and in this one, as Craig made the point on the EV, is that, hey, people are thinking about things differently. There's no doubt about it. They're thinking about them differently. Whether they're pulling the trigger or starting the engine to deliver them or not is a different kind of deal. But I think what we're seeing is that trend is slow enough where we're not putting in behavior trending models today because it doesn't make really economic sense to do it today. As it begins, as Tim indicated in his presentation, as we kind of move to that future where people may move away from economic kind of positions to non-economic positions, we may see that trend go up, right? And then as we begin to see that trend, our job in all of these initiatives is to really trend all the activity that's going on an ongoing basis. So as we see those trends go up, we can then begin to deliver some of that modeling that may be beneficial not only for planning, but not only for system planning or distribution planning, but for financial planning or whatever that may look like.
Sure.
So if you looked at our next step slides, it talked about a gap that we identified of not having a database that's tracking any of this. And so there's some fundamental things we have to put in place. We have to walk before we run, right? So there's some fundamental things we have to put in place to be able to be prepared for more intense analysis. I will say there is some activity that goes on with Brad's group, resource planning, that forecasts adoption of certain things in the load going forward. IEM had a similar process early on. We were kind of amazed. We had two different processes, but we kind of almost ended at the same point, within a pretty reasonable margin. So it was interesting because that model we had was using that IEM used was with a third party, which you're all familiar with, and which is different than the methodology that Brad uses in the resource planning. So it is interesting to see, here in the Midwest, we're a little different. A lot of the adoption factors we saw about reliability and low cost now have reduced the adoption. We know over time as technologies get cheaper and more efficient and better looking, solar on your house right now maybe not be pretty, but in the future there's going to be shingles, right, that look just like it. And so you start thinking about that will change the way people look at these at the level. But again, that foundational piece has to be built.
Right. I didn't ask about the data set that was mentioned on the slide and won't at this point. It's too deep into the detail, but good. I'm glad you put it in perspective. Very happy to see that in the works is a way to smooth out the soft costs that we've talked about before on installing on our own house. So that's really good. It's as President Burke and I have said before, I'm always going to be saying something like faster, more, sooner. And there's a cautionary tale out there, right? I mean, Simons came out and said, as well as GE, and said, we didn't get it right on renewable energy. So if they're not getting it right, we do need to be watchful of these things, and I'm glad we're acting on it. Glad we have this going on, and nobody's going to have the perfect crystal ball. Just glad that from where I sit, faster.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this initiative, it's really based on the customers driving this initiative. And as customers begin to speed up our attention to adapt to the customer increasing expectations around these technologies and other technologies will drive us faster to be able to do that very clearly. And I think our point here is, which was one of Director Moody's questions, is, you know, what we have been very clear on the integrated energy marketplace, and Troy and Tim jump in here, is that, you know, we really want to preserve this relationship with customers, both residential, commercial, industrial, because what we've seen in other regions of the country, Northeast, West, is that when utilities were not responsive early in that trending line, they began to lose connection with those customers. And when you begin to lose that connection with customers, you begin to lose other opportunities that may exist for you in the future with those customers. And so our position has always been, listen, we're going to bring a third party with us into a relationship. That's why we're going to create, just like we do with our in-home electric protection program, or just like we do with our AC management initiative, we partnered with third parties to deliver that because it's the most effective way for us to do that. And we'll look at those kind of partnerships with third parties to help us deliver that, where customers have a streamlined process for us. Certainly we see that on the commercial industrial side today, where they come to us and say, man, we're looking for a solution, and could you put it together and help us understand what that is? And we will most likely make some margin on that process to support those costs and support us doing that related work. But the customer gets a streamlined solution, which they typically look for. So they don't have 4 or 5 parties they're trying to general manage. They have us doing that work for them, and we see that in some of the Eco 24/7 work that we do and other initiatives that we do with them as well. And Julie and her team are very good about working with those customers.
Do you look at becoming vendors as well, a vendor of DER?
You know, very possibly. I think not in this first 2-year period. 2 years after, depending on kind of what occurs, very well we might be in that position. Now, that provides some risk, I would say, as we have, you know, stayed out and will stay out of the heating, cooling, ventilation business, because we have folks that don't want us to be in that business because of that trusted relationship. Sure. And so we've been very clear, and even the Nest work that we've done have kind of put that HVAC group on notice, going, hey, you guys are kind of getting into this business. And we're not going to get in the heating, cooling business. We've been very clear about that. That's not our niche. But as customers are looking for solutions, you know, we may either, you know, have those third-party relationships, or it may be just part of our electric service. I guess I don't want to go too far down that path because I don't know that, and I don't want to make people nervous about that.
And that actually was Mr. Moody's, one of Mr. Moody's questions. You have 2 different things you're saying, you know, to sort of help and have third-party involvement to help us with this, but at the same time, you have the quote as far as minimizing the risk of grid defection, which would be other third-party people. And I remember 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about when there were fuel cells, and fuel cells are really going to do well. Okay, every McDonald's can put in their own fuel cell. You know, and I think that's what you mean by risk
Absolutely.
defection. You're not talking about the little man who has his own little company or whatever. You're talking about a McDonald's coming in and having an entire distributed generation on its own. I think that's what you're talking about in that situation.
You brought up a really good point there about fuel cells.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about that.
10 years ago,
yes, that was the thing.
It's going to be the thing. And
fuel
so
cells in the hippo pond.
Positioning yourself properly from a risk standpoint is really important here in early stages. And by working with these third parties, it allows us to learn more about the technologies, learn more about the integration of our systems, you know, how they interface with the customers in the house. And so it gives us this platform that we don't necessarily have homegrown, but will over time. But that piece on the risk of a specific technology type is something that we definitely need to keep our eye on.
I mean, you may see us in the future, you know, as we begin to pursue other technologies on the generation side. Let's say solar may be that option because it gives us some capacity. It's relatively, cost is coming down. It may be economical for us to look at from a capacity perspective. And we begin to develop that kind of technical expertise, both on the installation, the design, and the maintenance of it. it gives us that opportunity to begin to kind of parlay that knowledge and experience and expertise into delivering those services for other customers. So, that's 2 years and beyond. We're really focused on education, getting our internal systems in place, being a good vetting for customers for us to give them good information, to begin to develop some partnerships. And as Tim said, we're working with a couple commercial industrial customers today on a couple distributed solar projects that we're going to be the general contractor on, right? Now, other companies, utility companies in the state are not doing that. We feel it's really important for us to maintain that clear relationship with the customer and not allow a third party to begin to cut that and erode that. And for us, that's really an important strategy around all of these integrated energy marketplace recommendations that we've made to the board.
One thought I would add to this conversation, drawing on experience from a prior life, is I feel really good about the balance of the strategy that's been developed and being talked about here. Balanced in that it's customer and industry focused, so we stay close to your point, Director Yoder, of where are our customers going. Good in that we're early and we want to get engaged now and serve customers and learn. We're also doing that in a prudent way around managing risk and managing the cost of investment. And finally, that we're doing it in a way that could scale as we build these foundational things. If adoption does take off, could scale both in terms of breadth of technologies it could adopt and scale of solutions that we could provide relatively quickly. So the ability to develop a strategy around anything that can check all of those boxes is often rare, and I feel good about it for that reason.
I would add a cautionary note. I don't think it's our place to get in and compete with private industry.
Right.
I think our place is to be a facilitator, provider of reliable, low-cost power. Just like EVs, we aren't in the business of selling cars. We aren't in the business of HVAC, energy-efficient lamps, or any of that stuff. We should facilitate, encourage, educate, but I would hesitate to ever get in. I have this argument at home about providing free Wi-Fi. We have the facilities, we have the capability to hang things out there and provide Wi-Fi. I don't think it's our place in the world to do that when there are private industry, private companies providing those services. I don't think it's fair when the government competes with private industry.
With this exception, they're just like the Rural Electrification Act.
Yes.
There are rural areas that do not have access to broadband.
And that may be, because it's not yet economical for those companies.
And may never be, just like you never get a McDonald's.
Which is why you have public power.
I would be open to that. But as a general rule, providing free Wi-Fi in the whole district's service area, no.
I think we have that same sense of our job is not to compete with private business, and very clearly. And that's why I think our role, even if you think about in-home electric protection program, the AC management program, is really to develop those relationships with partners who can deliver. Everything we do on our Eco 24/7 is done with either a control company, an electrical company, a mechanical contractor that is in the market to do that business. We essentially facilitate it and coordinate it and do those kinds of things. So,
Well, and provide an incentive for pursuing that activity. So I think OPPD should be in the business of incenting the activities that are in OPPD's interests. And the customer's interests as well.
yeah, if there's a broad, I mean, an example would be the Nest, the EV. The AC management is a great example of incenting that drives down overall cost for all customers in that example. So, and I would absolutely agree with that, Director Yoder.
And it's really interesting when you talk about incentives, because there are different incentives here. We talked earlier about the connection with other strategic directives, and by us trying to achieve strategic directive objectives on low rates, high reliability, you could argue that we're disincentivizing adoption of DER, right? By some of the items that were presented today. We're providing low rates and high reliability. That could be a disincentive for adoption of DER rates. So make sure that as we're providing incentives, they're the right incentives and not the opposite incentives that could hurt other directives.
We don't want to drive up rates and.
I'm pointing out the obvious here, but I think it's important for us to show that some of our own directives, the directives that the board is putting to us, are disincentives for some of the DER.
Right.
So it's how do you balance those?
Correct.
I think Troy hit the nail on the head. As technologies improve and get cheaper, that'll drive this. That's what's going to drive this, because people are smart overall. They watch this stuff. I'm surprised so many people were unaware of batteries, because Tesla's been out there with their home battery hanging on the garage wall for quite a while. But as that technology improves, that'll drive against the disincentive of low rates and reliability, high reliability. I mean, I'd rather hang a battery on the wall than have a backup generator for my house, in case I lose power. Because I've been in my house 21 years and never lost power because I've buried utilities. But there are places where it would make sense and probably be cheaper.
That's kind of the non-traditional solutions piece, and facilitating that for customers and that have those needs and desires. I think that's part of our strategy around certainly this recommendation or this topic.
All my questions are, I think,
Thank you.
finished with Mr. I mean, you covered
Thank you all very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Tim. Nice job. Nice job, team. So, good work.
Independent spent fuel storage installation security. They responded that the discount rate was 3.5. They've gone back and sent me a note saying, please correct that, it's actually 5%. So I just wanted to correct that before we left. Thank you.
You can take that off my list of questions. I didn't remember that either.
I was thinking, we usually use 5 something.
Okay, folks, that wraps it up.
Thank you.
See you on Thursday.
Very good. Thanks, everybody.
Much will be here in 8 minutes.